When I first arrived at the lighthouse, I was in awe of its towering presence. Standing at the edge of a rugged coastline, it looked ancient, almost alive. The wind howled as I stepped out of my car, the salty sea air filling my lungs. This was supposed to be my escape, a place where I could gather my thoughts, away from everything. I had rented the place for a few nights, intending to enjoy the solitude and the soothing sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs. The locals had warned me about staying there. They spoke of shadows moving in the night, of whispers that echoed from the sea. I had laughed it off, thinking they were just old sailor tales meant to scare off curious travelers. But as I stood before the massive structure, I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine. It was more than just the cold wind. It was the atmosphere around the lighthouse. Heavy, almost foreboding, like it was holding its breath. I grabbed my bag and headed toward the door, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the thick fog that had settled around the base. The door creaked loudly as I pushed it open, revealing a narrow hallway that led to the main room. The air inside was stale, carrying the faint scent of salt and decay. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the door slamming shut behind me with a force that made me jump. Once inside, I set down my bag and took a moment to look around. The interior was just as old and worn as the outside suggested. Dust coated every surface, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the ceiling. I found the staircase leading to the keeper's quarters, a small room at the top of the lighthouse where I'd be staying. The steps creaked under my weight as I ascended, each one echoing through the narrow tower. The room was simple: a small bed, a wooden desk, and a single window looking out over the sea. As I moved closer to the window, I noticed something odd. Scratched into the wooden frame were words, faint but readable. "Do not look at the sea after dark." My heart skipped a beat. Was this some kind of joke? I traced the letters with my fingers, feeling the rough grooves etched into the wood. The words filled me with a sense of unease, but I quickly pushed it aside. I unpacked my things, trying to ignore the growing feeling of dread. Nightfall wasn't far off, and I wanted to get settled before the darkness set in. As I busied myself, I couldn't shake the strange sensation that I was being watched. It was like a pair of eyes bored into the back of my skull, following my every move. I turned around several times, half expecting to see someone standing in the doorway, but the room remained empty. I was alone, or so I thought. As night fell, I made my way back down the staircase to the main room. I lit a few oil lamps I had brought with me, casting a warm but flickering glow around the room. The sound of the wind outside grew louder, the waves crashing violently against the rocks below. It was a stormy night, and the lighthouse seemed to groan in response, its ancient structure creaking and shifting. I tried to distract myself by reading, but the words on the page blurred as my mind wandered back to the warning etched on the window frame. "Do not look at the sea after dark." What could that mean? A part of me was tempted to defy it, to prove that it was just some superstition. But another part, the part that was beginning to feel the weight of the lighthouse's history, urged caution. Around midnight, I heard it, the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere above me. My heart pounded in my chest as I froze, listening. The footsteps moved in a steady rhythm, like someone pacing back and forth. I grabbed my flashlight, my hand shaking as I switched it on. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing in the silence. No response. I shined the flashlight up the staircase, but all I saw were shadows stretching into the darkness. I wanted to go up and check, but my legs felt like lead, rooted to the spot. The footsteps continued for what felt like an eternity, each one driving a nail of fear deeper into my mind. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. I forced myself to move, slowly climbing the staircase to the keeper's quarters. When I reached the top, the room was just as I had left it, empty and still. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The next morning, I woke up feeling uneasy. I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps I had heard. As I made my way down to the main room, I noticed something new, an old, dusty bookshelf in the corner. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now it caught my eye. Among the cobweb-covered books, one stood out. It was a small, leather-bound diary, its cover worn and brittle. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up, the pages crackling as I opened it. The diary belonged to the lighthouse's original keeper. His entries were dated over a century ago and described his life, tending to the light that guided ships safely through the treacherous waters. At first, the entries were mundane, talks of repairs, weather patterns, and lonely nights by the sea. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone shifted. The writing grew erratic, filled with scribbles and crossed-out words. One entry in particular made my blood run cold. There is something in the sea, something that watches me from the waves. It calls to me at night, whispering my name in the wind. I cannot look at it. I must not. My mind immediately went back to the warning scratched on the window frame. The keeper had known something that had driven him to the brink of madness. My eyes scanned further down the page, but the writing became illegible, nothing but frantic scratches across the paper. I slammed the diary shut, a chill crawling up my spine. I felt a strange compulsion to look out the window at the sea, to see if I could spot what the keeper had feared. But as I approached the window, my breath fogged up the glass. I wiped it with my sleeve, revealing nothing but the endless expanse of gray water. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something out there was watching me. The room seemed to darken around me, the air growing thick with an unspoken warning. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. I was beginning to understand why the locals avoided this place. Night fell quickly, the sky turning a deep, inky black as storm clouds rolled in. I busied myself with lighting the lamps and checking the generator that powered the lighthouse's beacon. The storm was growing stronger, the wind howling outside like a mournful wail. The sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below filled the air, creating an eerie symphony that echoed through the tower. As I climbed the stairs to the lantern room, I noticed the air had grown cold, far colder than it should have been, given the season. My flashlight flickered, and I felt a prickle of fear crawl up my neck. The atmosphere had changed. The lighthouse felt aware. I reached the top, opening the heavy metal door to the lantern room. The massive glass lens sat in the center, surrounded by a narrow walkway. I approached cautiously, peering out into the stormy sea. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, a shadowy figure standing on the rocks far below. My heart skipped a beat, and I squinted through the rain-soaked glass, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was there for just a moment before it vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. I stumbled back, almost knocking over the oil lamp on the table behind me. I tried to steady my breath, convincing myself it was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the storm. But then, the footsteps returned. This time, they were coming from the staircase, slow and deliberate, ascending toward me. I froze, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but I couldn't move. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by the faint creak of the old wood under pressure. I spun around, shining my flashlight down the stairs, but saw nothing, only darkness. The footsteps stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, as though something was standing right behind me. Slowly, I turned, shining the flashlight across the lantern room. It was empty, but the air was thick with a presence I couldn't see. I backed toward the door, keeping the light aimed at the shadows. I shut the lantern room door behind me and bolted down the stairs, not stopping until I reached the main floor. My chest heaved, and I pressed my back against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My mind was racing. Had I really seen something? Heard something? I needed to get out of there, but a part of me wanted answers. I remembered the diary I had found earlier and grabbed it from the shelf. Flipping through the pages again, I came across an entry I had missed before. It was short, almost frantic in its brevity. It spoke to me last night, a voice on the wind calling my name. It knows I'm here. I fear it will not let me leave. My blood turned to ice. The voice on the wind. I had heard it too, faint and distorted among the crashing waves outside. As if in response to my thoughts, the wind outside picked up, howling louder than before. It was different now, not just noise, but something more. I could hear it. Words, my name, faint but unmistakable. Aaron. My heart nearly stopped. I dropped the diary and stumbled toward the door, my fingers fumbling to turn the handle. I had to get out, away from that voice. But as I opened the door, I was greeted by a wall of fog. It was so thick I could barely see a foot in front of me. The sea roared beyond, the waves crashing violently against the rocks. I hesitated, torn between staying inside the lighthouse and venturing into the unknown outside. The voice grew louder, a chorus of whispers that seemed to rise up from the sea itself. "Stay, come to us," they beckoned, wrapping around me like a cold embrace. I slammed the door shut, my mind racing. I had to get away from that voice, but the fog outside made it impossible to leave. I was trapped. The lighthouse was no longer just an old building. It felt like a living, breathing entity with a will of its own. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls, filling the room with an unnerving hum. I tried to calm myself, focusing on the rhythmic sound of the waves, but the whispers grew louder, almost angry. I grabbed the oil lamp and made my way to the kitchen area, hoping to find something, anything, that would give me a sense of control. As I rummaged through the drawers, I found a small, rusted key. My heart skipped a beat. I had no idea what it was for, but a part of me knew it was important. I pocketed the key, feeling its weight as if it were a lifeline. I needed to clear my head, so I climbed the stairs to the keeper's quarters. As I stepped into the room, I noticed something strange. The window, which had been cloudy and scratched, was now clear, and beyond the glass, I saw the sea, churning and restless under the stormy sky. For a moment, I felt a compulsion to look out, to find whatever was hiding in those waves. But then I remembered the warning, "Do not look at the sea after dark." I tore my eyes away, focusing on the room instead. That's when I noticed it, a trapdoor in the corner, half hidden under a ragged rug. I had missed it before, but now it was as if the room wanted me to find it. My hands shook as I reached out and pulled back the rug, revealing the trapdoor's rusty handle. With a small key from the kitchen, I turned the lock and opened it. A narrow ladder descended into the darkness below. The air that rose from the trapdoor was cold and damp, filled with the scent of salt and rot. My stomach churned, but I had come too far to back out now. I took a deep breath and began my descent, each step down the ladder creaking ominously under my weight. The darkness swallowed me, the light from the oil lamp barely piercing the blackness around me. As I reached the bottom, I found myself in a small, stone-walled chamber. The walls were covered in strange carvings, symbols that looked ancient and almost otherworldly. My lamp cast eerie shadows across the markings, making them appear as if they were moving, writhing like trapped spirits. In the center of the room stood a single table, and on it was an old nautical map. It was yellowed with age, its edges frayed and torn. I stepped closer, holding the lamp over the map, and froze. The map showed the coastline, with the lighthouse marked in blood-red ink. Surrounding it, drawn in meticulous detail, were what looked like tentacles, reaching out toward the land. My heart raced as I traced the lines with my eyes, noticing a name scrawled in the corner. The Abyssal One. My mouth went dry. What had the lighthouse keeper discovered? What had he been guarding against? Suddenly, a gust of cold air swept through the chamber, extinguishing the lamp's flame. I was plunged into darkness, the symbols on the walls seeming to glow faintly with a sickly, greenish light. The whispers returned, louder than ever, filling my head with unintelligible words that made my ears ring. I backed away, my hand fumbling for the ladder, desperate to get out of this place. I scrambled up the ladder, my heart pounding against my ribs. The trapdoor slammed shut behind me as I pulled myself back into the keeper's quarters. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, trying to piece together what I had seen. The lighthouse, the map, the symbols, it all pointed to something far older and darker than I had imagined. And whatever it was reaching out from the sea. I reached for the diary again, flipping to the last pages in a frantic search for more clues. There, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was the keeper's final entry. I cannot hold it back any longer. The sea calls, and I fear I must answer. If you find this, do not stay. It knows you now. It will find you. My blood turned to ice. The keeper had left a warning, but it was too late. I had already looked out to the sea, and now it was coming for me. I looked toward the window, fear gripping my chest. Outside, the storm raged on, and through the glass, I could see the waves churning violently. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving in the water, dark, serpentine forms that twisted and writhed with the crashing of the waves. The voice on the wind grew louder, a chorus of whispers that pressed against the glass, begging me to open it, to let them in. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. The lighthouse was more than just a building. It was a barrier, a sentinel against whatever lurked in the sea. And now that I had crossed its threshold, I had become part of its curse. The whispers surged around me, filling the room with a deafening roar. The walls seemed to tremble, the shadows stretching toward me like clawed hands. Desperation took over. I grabbed the oil lamp, relit it with shaking hands, and stormed up to the lantern room. The sea outside roared louder, the storm pounding against the lighthouse with relentless fury. As I entered the room, I approached the massive glass lens at its center. It was the heart of the lighthouse, the beacon that had stood against the darkness for centuries. I had to light it. I had to use it to push back the shadows and whatever was clawing its way toward me from the sea. I opened the lens housing and poured the oil into the lamp mechanism, fumbling with the matches. My fingers slipped, and I cursed under my breath, striking another match. Finally, the flame caught, and the light burst forth, flooding the room with a blinding glow. The beacon turned, casting its powerful beam out over the raging sea. The whispers turned into screams, echoing against the lighthouse walls, as if the light itself was burning away the darkness. I watched as the beam cut through the fog, illuminating the water below. For a brief second, I saw them, dark, monstrous shapes writhing just beneath the surface, recoiling from the light. The lighthouse groaned, the very structure shaking as the storm continued to batter it. I held my breath, gripping the railing as the beam continued its sweep across the horizon. Slowly, the whispers faded, replaced by the sound of the wind and waves. The room grew quiet, the air lighter, as if the lighthouse had let out a sigh of relief. I sank to my knees, my heart still pounding. I had survived for now, but the lighthouse, and the sea it guarded, would always be there, waiting. If this tale of the lighthouse keeper's secret, Shadows of the Sea, chilled you to the bone, make sure to subscribe for more haunting stories. Share your thoughts. What would you do if you found yourself alone in a place like this, facing the unknown? Leave a comment, and don't forget to hit that like button if you crave more tales of darkness and the supernatural.